Satellos is a clinical stage drug development company focused on restoring natural muscle repair and regeneration in degenerative muscle diseases. CEO Frank Gleeson, Chief Medical Officer Wildon Farwell, and CFO Elizabeth Williams are here joining us to provide an overview on the company's recent accomplishments and outlining upcoming milestones and catalysts. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. Please remember this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Wildon, nice to meet you. And Frank and Liz, welcome back. It's great to see you again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Martin. It's great to be back speaking with you and speaking with both your audience and many of our audience. So I'm really pleased to be able to do this, and also to have the opportunity to introduce our Chief Medical Officer to everybody. So thank you for that.
All right. Why don't you take away with the presentation here then? Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I thought a place to start would be just to refresh everyone's memory about Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and for anyone who may be new to the story, to get a sense of how we look at this market and this disease area and why we're different. So first and foremost, this is an area of enormous need. Despite recent progress in new product development by others, this still remains a disease with no cure and no truly disease-changing treatments for children and young adults and older adults who live with this disease. Therefore, it represents a huge medical opportunity and also a very significant market opportunity. Sadly, this is a fatal genetic condition, and it affects boys primarily, 1 in 5,000 boys born annually worldwide. It affects all races and ethnicities in the same manner and the same percentages. And what it does that is so cruel is that it relentlessly robs children and young adults and older adults of their muscle and their functional ability. The standard of care in this area remains corticosteroids. And these drugs, while new versions have been developed, continue to have very significant side effects. There are over 12,000 young people in the US and Canada alone that are living with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. The numbers proportionately in Europe or in Asia would just factor up from there. The FDA has recently been very aggressive over the last few years in approving new medications for this. There are now 8 drugs approved in the United States for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, fewer in other countries. In the United States market, many of these drugs command annual costs in excess of $500,000 US per year, some much higher than that. And these are being reimbursed in many cases by insurance providers. So what is the opportunity for SAT 3247 in this context? Clearly, there is a multi-billion-dollar annual drug market in North America alone for an effective drug treatment. And so to us, this is kind of the eye on the prize from a commercial point of view, is moving our drug forward with as robust a data set, both preclinically and clinically, that we can develop as rapidly as possible in order to move towards getting our drug into broad use as a approved medicine. What is it about SAT 3247 that makes it different from every other approach to treating this disease? Well, firstly, we need to look at the disease itself. This disease presents early in life. It presents, generally speaking, in children that have begun to ambulate after age 2. Sometimes it can be observed physically earlier than that, but mostly it's kind of noticeable to parents as their children start to grow, rapidly, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age. And during this period of growth, these children do have muscle. They are born with muscle. Their muscle is functional at birth. Their muscle is functional during the early years of life, and they grow and they make new muscle. They don't keep up with the peers that do not have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, of course, and this becomes apparent the older they become. In later years, however, children, as they become adolescents and young adults and into their 20s, progressively and relentlessly lose their skeletal muscle. The muscle cells disappear, and they are not repairing and regenerating and making new muscle cells to replace the ones that are disappearing. And we're the ones who discovered why this is happening. And we've shone a spotlight on why this is happening and how this is happening. And what we've learned and what we are basically truly teaching the community is that in this age group, preteens, after the very young juvenile period, children experience a severe tipping point where muscle damage and muscle loss starts to rapidly outstrip their ability to make new muscle cells and keep up with the genetic illness that they were born with. And so we've designed our drug to correct this problem and literally to reboot the body's ability to repair and regenerate muscle. We're not adding anything to the body other than asking the individuals to take a pill by mouth on a daily basis that reboots a natural process of repair and regeneration. This is completely different than any other approach being pursued that is anywhere near clinical development. The idea is a daily, well-tolerated, non-invasive oral pill suitable for all genetic mutations and stages of the disease, and useful either as standalone treatment or added on to other approaches. So we see enormous potential. And this is why in our development plan, we have not only focused on getting to the point that we can treat children in a clinical trial as fast as we possibly can move, but also to see what benefit we could see, if any, in an older population, because this population has literally nothing at all that might be helpful for them. And nobody pays a development attention to that age group. So my colleague, Dr. Farwell, whom I will introduce in a moment, will take you through our clinical program and explain how we look at this market, what we think we're going to be able to generate in the coming months, quarters, and over the next year that could lead us to be in a position to pursue these multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. And it's that connection, once we are able to further demonstrate the benefit that can be realized and the penny drops, so to speak, that this could become a broad-based treatment for a horrible disease. This is what will drive the value that we represent. And we've seen it now in the last couple of weeks with a company like Avidity, who incidentally started their journey 6 years before Satellos was even created. And so they've been at this quite a long time to reach their sort of mountaintop. So we see ourselves in the footsteps of these other leaders over the next year to also ascend kind of the mountain that we're climbing. So one more slide, Liz, before I turn it over to Wildon. Just a quick reminder, the last time we got together with you, Martin, was back in May or June. And since the last time that we spoke, we've actually done an enormous amount. We presented our phase 1B clinical data from the adults that we were able to treat with 3247 at the Cure Duchenne Futures Conference. Very well received by the medical community and by the patient community. In June, we appointed new high-profile board members, and this was a deliberate plan of the company. We made changes to the board deliberately and with the full support of the departing board members to recognize we were transitioning from a company that was in early stage preclinical to phase 1 development into a company that was moving into later stage development with the potential to get drugs approved within the foreseeable future, not multiple years away. And so we conducted a global search to look for individuals with strong medical, drug development, and drug commercialization experience. And we were very fortunate to attract two extremely well-regarded individuals with remarkable backgrounds. Dr. Iris Lowe Friedrich has basically changed the future of UCB pharmaceuticals by leading over a many-year period as Executive Vice President, Chief Medical Officer, and Head of Development, at least 6 new products that were brought to market under her watch that represent blockbuster potential and literally have turned UCB into a major global pharmaceutical player in the neuroscience area. And Selwyn Ho, who has been involved in numerous both large and small companies in various positions, both development and commercial, involved in M&A activities, and also has an extraordinarily strong depth of understanding of what is required to move drugs through clinical development and into commercialization. And you simply can't attract individuals like this as a small company if they don't believe you have something very, very special and that you have the competence to carry it out. And in July, we appointed Dr. Wildon Farwell as our Chief Medical Officer. I'm absolutely thrilled that Wildon chose to join us. He is one of those individuals with this rare aptitude for talking to people in a way that is very understandable, despite having, deep medical understanding of neurological and degenerative disorders. He has been involved directly, personally, in leading the charge on multiple product development programs, including 2 entirely novel drugs that were approved by the FDA in ALS and spinal muscular atrophy that were at their time similar, we believe, to what we're trying to do with 3247. And so we're very, very lucky that he has joined us. He joins us from Dyne Pharmaceuticals, which many of you know has an excellent reputation, and Wildon has a deep understanding as well of DMD. So we're really thrilled that he's on our team and is now leading our strategic initiatives and is a wonderful, wonderful complement to our head of clinical operations, Courtney Wells, who herself has been responsible for leading the charge on products that have directly, under her program management, been approved by the FDA. So strong, a good team, much stronger now. In September, we announced that we submitted globally to multiple jurisdictions, regulatory packages, to initiate a phase 2 program in children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Wildon will talk more about that and give you a sense of where we are with all of these initiatives. In parallel to doing this, I want to point out we have also identified the 25 clinical sites across these various jurisdictions that we intend to work with. We have recruited and hired multiple program management people onto our team to manage these relationships as we move forward, and we're well positioned to push the button and move rapidly once all of these jurisdictions have given us the go-ahead. In October, we presented additional clinical data related to our phase 1b trial in adults at the World Muscle Society. Wildon can speak to that as well, as he was there presenting the data. And I can tell you, again, it was extremely well received by the medical community. There are not so many patients that attend World Muscle Society. It's too hard for them often, and it's really geared towards industry more than it is to patients. But the medical community that supports Duchenne are extremely excited about the prospects of a trial with 3247. And we also announced the first patient dosed with in our long-term follow-up of the phase 1b study. We also will tell you our plans to how we wish and intend to expand that trial to include additional patients. And what I'd like to point out is that when we first started interacting with Martin and his group, we had mouse data. That was about a year and a half ago. That's what we had, mouse data. And since we've started talking to Martin, and I think this is all Martin's doing because he's been a good luck charm for us, we have moved from mice into canine model, and we showed really quite transformational changes in the animals we were able to treat. And that led us to also understand at a much deeper molecular level of the biology that's at play, exactly how we might want to think about assessing the changes that we're seeing in the physiology of the animals, in the muscle itself, which led us to create this idea of a regenerative index. And from there, from that work of seeing these results in canine, within a year, we've completed 2 phase 1 trials, have started a third trial, LT001, and have filed to begin additional trial in children that could very well be pivotal for us over the next year. So this is quite extraordinary developments, actually, especially for in the biotech space for companies that are not, the size of Merck or Pfizer. So Wildon will tell you a lot more now about our plans moving forward. And so Wildon, over to you.
Thanks, Frank. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you and talk through what I believe are really compelling data from the SAT-3247 clinical program to date. So as many of you may know, as Frank alluded to, Satellos conducted a phase 1 trial within adults with Duchenne. There were 5 adults that participated in this clinical trial. They were between the ages of 20 and 27 years old. Now, if people aren't familiar with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, most people with Duchenne die in their 30s, okay? They die because of cardiorespiratory failure. By the time they're in their 20s, they have lost a lot of muscle. They have had profound muscle loss. And so what Satellos aimed to do was first to see what is the safety and tolerability of 3247 in this population. What are the drug concentrations in the blood? Are they as predicted? And then what Satellos began to do was to evaluate endpoints that matter to people in this age range with Duchenne. So the safety and tolerability was unremarkable. It was just as was predicted preclinically. There were no concerning safety signals identified. Everything was very well tolerated. The drug concentrations were just as predicted. Everything was consistent with what was seen preclinically. And so what Satellos was able to do was again look at different assessments of function. Now, again, in this population where there is such profound muscle loss, breathing becomes a very important part of their lives. Unfortunately, these people develop weakness in their diaphragm. They develop weakness in the muscles that surround their ribs. They're not able to breathe as well as people without disease. You typically see a 5% decline per year in a measure called the FVC, the forced vital capacity. This is how much air are you able to breathe out of your lungs. What Satellos was able to demonstrate was in 28 days, the four participants who had this evaluation at baseline and then at day 28, Satellos saw a near 6% improvement. And this was a consistent improvement across all four of these participants. So, small data set, short period of time, but a degree of benefit that has not been able to be demonstrated in this population. So if this were to be maintained over a long period of time, this would be very impactful to patients. Again, in this age range, people typically die because their lungs stop working. They typically die because they're not able to breathe as much as their younger uh, family members or friends. So to see this degree of benefit is very encouraging and quite remarkable. What was also demonstrated was an improvement in hand grip strength. So again, in this population where they have profound weakness, they're very dependent upon what function they have in their arms and in their upper body. And so there are a lot of patients who are very dependent upon using a wheelchair with their hand to be able to move around, to be able to function. So what Satellos demonstrated is the grip strength in the hand almost doubled across the entire five participants. When you look at the individual results, what you see are that three of the participants actually had a several-fold improvement in hand grip strength. Again, at this point in the natural history, patients don't typically see any improvement, certainly not a doubling of improvement in hand grip. Almost all participants in other clinical trials have a decline in their hand grip strength. So to be able to see a near doubling that's consistent across participants in both their dominant and non-dominant, this again is quite remarkable and it's very encouraging for Satellos and our program going forward. What we aimed to do was to put this data into context. How does this data stack up to what is expected in the natural history with what has been recorded by other patients of similar age and with the same disease? So on the figure to the left, you see the red and blue lines. These are the different trajectories, the different patterns of hand grip strength by different ages. You can see that the maximum hand grip typically occurs around age 15, and then you see that it declines as age increases. On the right-hand side, what I first want to call your attention to are the dots at the bottom of each of the green lines. So what you see with those dots is that those dots are within the lines of the natural history. These are the baseline values for the 5 participants in the phase 1 trial. So at baseline, when the participants started on drug, their hand grip levels were consistent. They were the same as what would be expected among similar aged patients. What you then see are the green lines, which represents the improvement that these participants had once they started receiving 3247. And you see that that improvement is very different than what is ever seen in the natural history. And in fact, after they receive 3247, they're achieving levels of hand grip strength that aren't seen in the natural history. We talk about this as being the white space, this opportunity to demonstrate improvement beyond what is ever seen in the natural history. Again, small data set, short period of time, but if we continue to see this degree of benefit, if this benefit is maintained over time, as we enroll more participants in this trial, if more of the participants see this type of benefit, that will be very encouraging, very remarkable, very differentiating from everything that has been seen previous to this. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz now just to talk a little bit about the overall space in Duchenne. Liz?
Thanks, Wildon. So really exciting data. We're particularly excited because this data is just the beginning of what we're going to see over the next 12 months. We are in the process of launching a clinical trial in pediatric patients. We announced just about, I think, 2 weeks ago that we dosed the first patient in a long-term follow-up study from the phase 1b. So we are going to have 2 clinical studies running in parallel over the next 12 months. And we're going to see regular updates from both of these trials going forward. So as Frank mentioned at the beginning of the call, there's been an enormous amount of work ongoing to get these 2 trials set up. There are hundreds of agreements, thousands of pages of regulatory documentation, 25 clinical sites that require vetting and visits and setup and training. And all of this work has been going on over the last couple of months. These aren't updates that we can press release to tell the market that they're happening, but they are all setting us up so that once we start the clinical trial, things are going to move quickly, and we're going to be in a position where we're collecting data and we can share that data with investors. So the first trial, LT101, is our long-term follow-up study. This is for the adult patients that participated in the 28-day study. They've been invited to come back into a 11-month study where they can continue to get drug for 11 months. We also, because we're setting up this trial, and there's a lot of costs associated with just initiating a trial, we thought, why not open it up and add in more patients so we can collect more data? So we're in the process of expanding the patient pool and the patient opportunity to include up to 20 patients in that study. This is an open label study, which means we'll be able to look at the data as it becomes available. So approximately every 3 months, we're going to evaluate the patients in the study. So after 3 months, we're going to look at their grip strength and their lung capacity, their forced vital capacity again. And we're also going to look at a number of blood-based biomarkers. And that first update on the first patients coming in will be available in Q1 of next year. So if we continue to see stabilization and improvements in the patients that previously participated in the 28-day study, that will be really exciting data, which we're looking forward to. One of the things we know about 3247 and the animals that we've dosed with our drug, the longer the animals are on drug, the stronger they become. So we're very hopeful that as patients have a longer period of time to be on drug, that we'll continue to see improvements in their markers. And then again, at 6 months, we're going to look at grip strength and forced vital capacity. For the patients that are able to, we're going to take a baseline MRI when they come back into the study or when they start the study. And after 6 months, we will do an additional MRI, and we'll be able to look at their fat fraction, which would be a really interesting data set as well. And then at the end of 11 months, which we anticipate being in the second half of 2026, we'll have data from the full study. So very regular cadence of updates from that particular trial. And then also really exciting, CL201. We are really excited to see what this drug can do in a patient population where they have a lot more muscle to begin with. So we saw remarkable improvements in patients that were very late stage, had very limited muscle left, and yet the drug was able to have a meaningful effect. So we're really excited to see in these younger patients what the impact could be. So we announced a couple of weeks ago that we have submitted all of our global regulatory packages as a number of different countries. That those interactions and approvals are ongoing. But we are on track to have the first patient come into the study before the end of this year. We, as Frank mentioned, are planning to have 25 clinical sites, which is a very robust study. The more sites you have, the faster you can enroll a study. So in our case, we want to be able to have data as quickly as possible. So we have a very aggressive clinical site strategy from that perspective. We have a significant amount of demand already from individuals interested in participating in the study. So we're hopeful that it will recruit quickly. It's going to be a 3-month study, on placebo-controlled study, and then a 9-month long-term follow-up. So we'll be able to provide an update in Q1 in terms of the recruitment and the sites and how that is all going, and also guidance in terms of when we anticipate the study to be fully enrolled. At Q2, we expect to be able to provide an update on blinded data. So we'll still be recruiting patients. Well, we'll still have patients in the study, but we will be able to look at the data. We're going to have 2 treatment cohorts and 1 placebo cohort, and we'll be able to look on a blinded basis to see if there's separation between those cohorts, which we would expect to see if the drug works the way that we know it does in animals. And then we anticipate in the second half of 2026 to have the study complete, enrollment complete, and to have some data that if it looks like the data Wildon reviewed with our adult patients, if we're in that white space with one or both of these studies, then there is a meaningful opportunity that we could begin to have discussions with regulators about potential approval of this drug. So we're really excited about the next 12 months and the potential for what we have planned. And then just to put a little bit of this in context, and many of you are familiar with these competitors working in the DMD space. We believe that Satellos is significantly undervalued given where we're currently at. And I think this slide kind of puts it a little bit into perspective. The comparable companies are trading at many multiples of where Satellos is at. Avidity, as Frank mentioned earlier in the call, just announced this week that Novartis is buying them for $12 billion. And this is a company working in the muscle space. So they have a DMD program. They also have a FSHD program and a DM1 program. So that's their focus. So right in the wheelhouse of what Satellos has potential to address as well. Companies like Dyne, where Wildon's former company is working in DMD and DM1 space. And you can see their market cap at 3.4 billion is many, many, many multiples of where Satellos is currently at. So what's exciting is that these companies do have more data than Satellos currently has, but we are very close to closing that gap. So in the next 12 months, we will have more data than the majority of these companies in Duchenne. So there's a huge potential in terms of increased valuation as we initiate the clinical trials, enroll patients, and report on data to close that valuation gap. We haven't talked about it a little bit today, but 3247 has potential in these other areas as well, particularly in FSHD, where we have presented data at a conference last year showing that have the opportunity to have a meaningful impact in that disease area as well. So one thing, last thing to sort of highlight is all of these companies are not focused on what Satellos is focused on. As Frank talked about at the beginning, these companies are focused on slowing the progression of the disease. They are not focused on the repair and regeneration of muscle in these patients. And that is something that only Satellos is doing. The other piece is that these drugs are difficult to administer. They're hospital administration. There are a lot of safety concerns, particularly in the gene therapy, and many of you will be familiar with Sarepta and the issues that there have been with their drug. And Satellos has a pill. There's no need to go into the hospital to get the drug. It's something you can take at home. It's a small molecule. It's easy to manufacture. It's inexpensive to manufacture. And it's been shown to be very safe. So huge differentiation in those areas. The other thing you can see on the slide here is that the exon skipping drugs that Wave and Avidity and Dyne are working on are addressing a very small subset of the Duchenne market. So you can see in the case of Avidity, their drug for Duchenne is addressing patients that have exon 44, which is only 6% of the market. So Satellos' approach is not dependent on an exon. We expect it to be broadly applicable to any patient with Duchenne, regardless of their exon status, regardless of their ambulation status. So huge potential in terms of addressing the market. So we're really excited to get this drug into the clinic, into patients, and be able to start closing this valuation gap over the next number of quarters.
Thank you very much. That was, you covered a lot of territories, and a lot of the questions I have, I can check those off as you've addressed that. With the adult trial that was completed in the springtime, and those patients are re-enrolling in the new study, just to clarify, those patients, they were on a 28-day dose of it. They stopped, and now it'll be, what, 5, 6, or whatever months, and they're going to restart on the drug. Is that correct, or have they been on the drug the whole time? And I guess given that they started and then stopped, sorry, a two-part question, is that going to affect it, or are you going to be able to see some from their baseline now, how it's changed since when you did it, you assessed them several months ago?
Yeah, Martin, thanks for those clarifying questions. So, yes, when participants finished the Part 1B of the Phase 1 trial, they stopped receiving 3247. So it's been a few months since the participants received their last dose. So it'll be part of what we're looking at as they come back and start drug again, is just where are they in their disease process? The benefit that they received in that Phase 1 trial, have they been able to maintain that? Have they potentially lost any function or any other um mobility? So we'll have to see as participants return and are evaluated. We do believe that with more time on drug, there is greater opportunity to see benefit. That's what we saw preclinically across both the MDX mouse model as well as the dog model. So one of the things we're excited about is in both of the studies that we're kicking off this year, we'll be able to have longer term exposure to be able to see what the effect is of 3247 over a longer period of time.
With the upcoming trial, is and you were going to report data after 3 months of, will that be 3 months from when the last patient was dosed, or whenever, like, when is that sort of 3 months happening, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it's on us to enroll the participants and to get them back on the drug as quickly as possible. We're working closely with the site and with the participants to do that. Obviously, again, these are participants who are sick and are working to participate, but we will work with them as well to help them into the trial as quickly as possible. We would then anticipate that once that last participant is enrolled, approximately 3 months after that, we should begin to be in a position to look at the data and then be able to share that data with the broader community.
Will you be measuring, will it be the same metrics you're measuring, the grip strength and the FVC, or are there other parameters you'll be measuring and we'll be seeing in the headlines?
So we are measuring the same parameters that we first measured in the phase 1 trial, hand grip strength, the respiratory function. We are also measuring some additional parameters to look at other assessments of upper limb mobility, upper limb strength. We're looking at different biomarkers, again, looking at the same biomarkers that we observed in the first study to see with more time on drug, do we begin to see changes. We're going to be looking at new novel biomarkers to see if we can identify changes there. But many of the assessments will be the same and allow us to continue to evaluate change over time.
Is it going to be hard to find recruits for the study? I would think patients would likely be eager to try it out, but maybe their health would get in the way.
Well, Martin, I think it's important to put this study into context. Okay, so in adults with Duchenne, there really are no effective therapies. Steroids are used, that's the standard of care. Um, Sometimes in some patients, primarily in the US, they will receive an exon skipper. As Liz articulated, it's a very limited uh, pool of patients that qualify for the exon skippers. The gene therapies really aren't available anywhere outside of the US, and then in the US, they're really not available now to adults. And so in the adult population, um, they're very anxious and they're very interested to participate in clinical trials. And so we do believe that within Australia, where this trial is located right now, that there are people who will want to participate in this long-term extension study. Um, Among the pediatric population for our phase 2 study, again, very few options available. There are, again, some exon skipper programs available. There is some gene therapy, but in many countries, none of those options are available. So there has been a lot of excitement about Satellos and the program. There has been a lot of patients already reaching out to us to better understand when these trials are starting and the populations that will qualify for these trials. So we believe these studies will enroll quite quickly and that we'll be able to report data over the next year in a building way. Kind of as the data becomes available, we'll be able to present more of it, and then more of it, and then more of it, so that by this time next year, we believe we will have a very robust data set.
I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves and too optimistic here, but if it is showing strong effect through the process, is there any chance the regulators will look at this and say, "Oh, wow, that something important is happening here. Like we need to fast track it, or it changes the way the regulators look at the
Absolutely.
drug?"
Absolutely, Martin. Absolutely. This is something I'm very familiar with. This is something I've done my entire career in clinical development. When we were developing Spinraza for spinal muscular atrophy, we had ongoing, consistent dialogue with regulators, updating them on the developments that we saw. And that led to us being able to turn around that filing very quickly and for the regulators to be able to act on that filing very quickly. I believe at Satellos we have a very similar opportunity. Again, because there are very few options for adults living with Duchenne. The unmet medical need is enormous in this population. Again, most people with Duchenne unfortunately die in their 30s. Um, so if we continue to see the type of benefit in these older adults that we saw in the phase 1 trial, if we see that more adults are seeing this degree of benefit, if we see that that benefit is expanding to other endpoints, if it continues to develop and progress over time, I know that we will be going to regulators, having conversations with them, updating them on the data, and working with them to bring this to patients as quickly as possible. Uh, there is absolute precedent for that. There is absolute pathways within the regulatory guidance to be able to do that. And I think it's something we should absolutely do.
I would also think, given the safety profile is so, I guess, benign or non-risky, like in that sense, there's not a lot of trade-offs. So I guess that would improve the likelihood or the possibility of any sort of accelerated pathway.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Martin, and it is something that the regulators pay a lot of attention to, appropriately so, is the overall safety profile. It's not enough just to have an effective drug. They really want an effective drug that has a very reasonable, appropriate safety profile. And so far, the data from the phase 1 trial shows that 3247 has a reasonable safety profile. There were really no safety concerns identified in the healthy volunteer portion of the study or in the adults with Duchenne. Um, there have really been no concerning safety findings in the preclinical studies for 3247. I believe it's partly because how this drug is working. Again, the drug only works in the satellite cells that want to divide, that are ready to divide. And so that biology allows the safety profile that we're seeing right now. And so I think if this safety profile continues, if we continue to see the degree of benefit that we've seen so far, I believe that really does allow for very good engagement with regulators over the coming year.
All right. Do patients have to go off? Do they have to change any of their other treatments or that like go off their corticosteroids or that? Or is it the same standard of care plus Satellos?
Well, within the clinical trials, we will require that participants maintain their regimens. We will limit some of the medications that they can receive, just in order for us to better understand the emerging data from the clinical trial. Now, what we believe, though, is that, as Frank alluded to, we do believe that 3247 will be efficacious on its own, that it has the ability to bring benefit to patients by itself. We also believe that if someone is able to receive another therapy, that there may be the opportunity for additional benefit on top of what 3247 is able to provide. So, in a world where 3247 is available to a broad patient population, we believe it can be efficacious on its own and that it can also be used in combination. Within the clinical trials, we have to manage the medications just to be able to understand the safety and efficacy of 3247 alone. But once the drug is available broadly, we think the drug can be used in multiple different patient populations.
Onto the regulatory side of things, a question here from the audience. The IND filing announcement was on September 22nd. We are past the 30-day window. Can you comment on that? Is everything
Sure.
going okay with the FDA? And I guess just to add on to that, with the budget turmoil in the US, is that affecting your interactions with the FDA?
Yeah, when we made the announcement, we announced that we had filed to several different regulatory agencies in the US and the UK and Europe and Serbia and Australia. I will just say that our engagement is going very well. We're very pleased with the engagement we've had so far. We've not seen any impact in the US by the discussions around the FDA and such. We're very satisfied with where we are, and we'll be able to enroll the study again. We believe very quickly as the approvals become.
Liz, can you give us any perspective on potential uplistings and potential fundraisings for Satellos?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remind everyone that we do have the funding to run both of the clinical trials that we discussed today. So the pediatric study as well as the long-term follow-up study were funded through 2026 into early 2027. So we've got a good amount of runway. We do think it's important in terms of the valuation of the company on a longer term basis and to help try to close that valuation gap that we do need to be listed on NASDAQ and have access to the broader US market. So that is something that we're working on in the background. There's a number of different components, like kind of technical components, and then there's, relationship management. I think, today we announced we'll be participating in 2 bank conferences, Guggenheim, Stifel. We've been at many, many conferences throughout the year. So we've got great exposure on a banking and analyst side and on an investor side as well. And we just want to be mindful about picking the right time to complete the uplist. We want to be protective of our existing shareholders. We will need to do a reverse share split, most likely. So we want to be really intentional about the timing around that and what that looks like. So we think probably in the next 2 quarters, it will make sense. So we're listed on NASDAQ before we're reading out data from the phase 2 clinical trial, the pediatrics trial. But we haven't made any commitments at this point in time as to what that looks like in terms of exact timing.
All right. There are several questions here from the audience. Do you have any sense of, you talked about how expensive some of the other treatments are out there and how yours is relatively easy to make, on what the potential price or costing could be on it, and if it would be sort of then available for a wide audience of whoever does need it?
Maybe I can start with that one. In terms of cost, when we talk about cost of goods sold, COGS for a product like ours are a fraction of the COGS for biologic products or injectable products. So we will have enormous margin to work with ultimately when we go to market. It's premature for us to be forecasting prices at this point. We don't have an approved product. We haven't yet begun dialogue with insurers and so on. So it would be premature for us to speculate. But there is considerable room for us to provide both accessible pricing as well as extraordinarily high margins for shareholder concerns. So this is an important balance that we'll need to manage as we move forward. But we think about it a great deal. And as I said, at this stage, it's simply premature to be thinking about and talking about this.
With the non-adult trial that's scheduled, would the new first patients be likely dosed in Q1 of next year, or could that potentially be in Q4 even of this year?
No, what we've said is our plan is to initiate that trial this year. So we're still on track to be able to do that.
Okay. All right. Why was the initial enrollment in Australia only able to get 5 participants?
I don't think it was that we were only able to get five. I think it was that, that was a number that gave us the opportunity to answer the questions that we had for that trial. Again, the purpose of that trial was really what is the safety, tolerability in an adult Duchenne population? What is the drug concentration that we're able to achieve with that 60 milligram dose? Those were the key questions that needed to be answered. And then because the participants were willing, we were able to explore some of these efficacy assessments. So now we have additional questions where we want to see what's the long-term safety tolerability, what is the long-term opportunity for efficacy, and that's where we're expanding the number of participants to be evaluated for those questions.
Will patients who received gene therapies in the past be excluded, or could they be included in your trials?
We do believe that patients who have received gene therapy may be able to receive 3247. We haven't finalized our protocol with the kids just yet to uh, be able to speak to that, but it is something that we are considering and do believe that we should be able to do.
Will the regeneration index and MRI be used as intermediate clinical endpoints for accelerated approval with the FDA if pursued?
I want to commend whoever asked that question. That's a very good question, and obviously someone is paying attention to Satellos. So thank you for that question. So I'm very excited by the regeneration index and by what we may be able to see with muscle MRI. I think if we see in the muscle biopsies in the kids, what was able to be demonstrated in the dog Duchenne model, that will be very encouraging. If we can then collaborate or correlate that with functional change, if we can see change in the muscle MRI, correlate that with functional change, that becomes a path to accelerated approval. So in Duchenne, typically people talk about dystrophin as a surrogate biomarker. Satellos won't be looking at dystrophin levels, but looking at muscle histology, looking at muscle MRI may give us the opportunity for accelerated approval through this intermediate pathway as well.
I'm going to read out a question here. I'm not too sure. Maybe it was mistyped or that, but we'll try it. What will the planned stop of receiving therapy for younger population during the phase 2 study be? 3 to 9 months, or how many in between?
So there is no plan to stop drug within the pediatric population. So it's a randomized placebo-controlled trial. It'll be a 3-month uh, randomization placebo period, after which we plan to initiate a long-term evaluation, a long-term study. And so we would plan for those to be concurrent. As participants complete the placebo-controlled portion of the study, they would then roll straight into the long-term extension. So we don't foresee a gap in the pediatric population.
We are at an hour here now, and I think, and we've covered all of the questions that have been posted. Would you like to make any final comments or summary statements before we wrap this up?
I am really excited about what we have in front of us over the coming year. If you think about where we are today, where we have 5 adults with Duchenne who received 3247 for 28 days. And then we're beginning to initiate these new clinical trials where we will have uh, many more adults, 10 or more adults with Duchenne. We'll have kids for the first time, up to around 50 kids that have received 3247. By this time next year, we'll have close to 75, maybe more participants who have received 3247. Many of them who have received 3247 for over 6 months period of time. If you think back to what Exondys had when they were approved, where they had less than 20 kids uh, in that data set. This time next year, we will have a very remarkable data set, and we'll have the opportunity over the coming months to provide additional updates to see how the data is growing, emerging, to see what function is able to be identified, what the overall safety profile. I think it puts us in a very good place to have conversations with regulators, to have conversations with the investing community, and most importantly, I believe it'll put us in a great position to bring therapy to patients as quickly as possible. And so, that's what we're in this for, is to bring therapies to patients as quickly as possible. And I believe Satellos is set up to do just that.
Wildon, thank you very much. Liz, Frank, I really appreciate taking the time. I think that was excellent. We covered a lot of territory, and yeah, the next 12 months seem to be very exciting with hopefully a lot of good news. So thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thank you.